Hey, welcome to day 12 of the Relation Fit series. Today, we're going to talk about the art of hope. This is such an important subject in relationships. And it really lends itself to a multifaceted character trait. This one is, it's hard because it demands so much from you. It's hard in a different way that these last few are hard. It's a different kind of hard. Because it demands you bringing something. Oftentimes when we think of hope, we think of it as something we have when things are dark. And that would be our responsibility in relationships, that when things are dark, we offer the light. That if the relationship looks like there's nowhere to go but down, we step in, we do the work, we offer the white flag of peace, saying, hey, I'll bring the hope to the relationship. It can also look like providing that in a relationship to someone else who's going through that dark time, right? But we want to be a people of hope because we have a hope and we can be the hope that we have. Well, 1 Corinthians 13 actually says this one straightforward. I'm going to read it in its entirety to you. It says this: love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It is not boastful. It is not arrogant. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not irritable and does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things. Here it is, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never ends. The important part there that I want you to see is the all things, this rhythm in the end, that it bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. These all things literally mean all things. That's why it's so hard. That's why it's for the tight relationships. Like these are like, okay, now let's take these to the deeper relationships because it's in all things that it's our responsibility. Does that make sense? This is here to help us have great relationships. Now, I want to tell you, this passage is not about relationships at all. The 1 Corinthians 13 passage isn't about relationships. In fact, if you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and 1 Corinthians chapter 14, they're both about leadership in the church. I don't think Paul is talking about leadership, takes a break to talk about love, and then goes back to talking about leadership. I think he's talking about leadership, and he's saying the best way to lead is to love. And so one of the things I know about leadership is that it demands relationship. And these principles are about love because love is and love is not, and it does these things. Yet, in the context of that, there are principles taken from it that we can apply to the character of our own heart and our own selves that make our relationships better. So when you're done this and you look at it in its pure context, you're going to be not just a better character, but a better leader, because it is your responsibility to lead in the relationship with these characteristics, because when you know better, you do better. And through this, you're knowing better. Love hopes all things. There's a story in the Bible you're probably familiar with, and I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to teach it to you in a way that frames it for hope in relationships. The story goes like this. After this, Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee. A huge crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was performing by healing the sick. They wanted to see more. Jesus went up a mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now, the Passover, which is a Jewish festival, was near. So when Jesus looked up and noticed a huge crowd coming toward him, he asked Philip, "Where are we going to buy bread so that these people can eat?" He asked this to test him because he already knew what he was going to do. And so Philip answered, 200 denarii worth of bread wouldn't be enough for each of them to have even a little. In other words, like a whole year's wage wouldn't be enough to feed these people. Philip answered Jesus, and then one of his disciples, Andrew, who is Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many?" Like, that's not going to feed these people. Jesus said, "Tell the people to sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, so they sat down. The men numbered about 5,000. That does not include their wives and their children. Some scholars think there were around 15,000 people present or more. Then Jesus took the loaves, and after giving thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also with the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were full, he told his disciples, "Collect the leftovers so that nothing is wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves that were left over by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "Truly, this is the prophet who has come into the world." Therefore, when Jesus realized they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Now, that's a really cool story of how Jesus takes a little, turns it into a lot. What does this have to do with hope? And what does it have to do with my relationships? Well, in relationships, there are needs. Needs come in different forms. Sometimes needs come because of struggles. Sometimes needs come because of sickness. Sometimes needs come because of attention. Sometimes they come from personality. But there is a gap between what is needed and what exists. And you're going to be in relationships when what is required of you is no match for what you actually have to offer. See, you might not be prepared to walk with that friend through that hard time. You don't have the words. You don't have the experience. You don't know what to do or say. You might not have the forgiveness that's needed to extend to that friend that needs more than you have to give at the moment. You might not have enough patience to extend in this relationship to maintain what's required or what's being asked of you. There's always going to be a need in your relationships, especially those closest to you, that far exceeds the amount that you have to give. The opposite is also true. You're going to have friends, you're going to have close people in your lives and relationships where they have a gap, the same like you had, but they have it. And maybe that gap isn't towards you. Maybe it's just a gap in their life where they don't have enough to get to that. And it could be anything. It could be financial. It could be relational. It could be psychological. There's a gap between what they need and what they have. What do you do when the relationship requires something that neither person has? And this is where the art of hope comes in. Because I need you to understand something. I think you're here because you love God and you want to become an unreasonably committed follower of Jesus, because this is, after all, a Bible study. But I would say this and offer this in case you don't have that kind of relationship with Jesus. I would say this. If you don't have Jesus as the center of your relationship, that gap between what is needed and what you have will never be bridged. It will never be enough. You will never be enough for that relationship. That person will never be enough for you in this relationship. Your spouse will never be enough to meet your needs. You will never be enough to meet your spouse's needs. You will never be enough to meet your kids' needs. Your kids will never be enough to meet your expectations or your needs. Your parents are going to let you down, and you probably have already let them down. There's going to be a gap between what is needed and what you have to give. If you don't have Jesus as the center of those relationships, that gap will always be unbridged, and that gap will always exist. And you will always find yourself frustrated for not being able to meet the expectation of fulfilling that gap. But you know it, and I know it, that you don't have enough of that to give. And you also know that they don't have that enough to give to fulfill your need. But when Jesus is the center of the relationship, there's always hope to bridge the gap. I love Andrew's response here. Andrew finds a little boy who offers 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And Andrew says, "We've got this. I don't have enough to feed everybody, but I've got this little bit. This is what I do have. I don't have the finances to bridge your gap of your job loss, but here's what I do have. I don't have the answer to your family's problems. I can't mend those relationships for you. I can't fix your broken past. But here's what I do have. It's not enough to bridge the gap. I don't have it in me to forgive this deep betrayal. What I do have is I can hang in there today. That's all I can promise you right now. I'm here today. I can't promise you tomorrow, but I'm here today. I give you what little I do have." And Andrew is looking at what they don't have, not what they do have. He says, "We have 5 loaves and 2 fishes, but what are these among so many? But what is this one day compared to eternity? What is this little bit compared to the need that you have?" But when you take the little bit that you have, the little bit of patience, the little bit of forgiveness, the little bit of resources, the little bit of joy, the little bit of vision, the little bit of passion, the little bit of intimacy, the little bit of a listening ear, a little bit of time, a little bit of talent. I could go on, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. If you take the little bit you have and you put it in the hands of Jesus, He multiplies the little bit to bridge the gap, to meet the whole need. But if you don't have Jesus as the center of that relationship, you will always be stuck trying to bridge the gap, and you will always fall short. And here's the truth. You might have Jesus at the center of your life, but is he the center of your marriage? Are both of you aware that Jesus is the center? How do you practice that? Is Jesus the center of your relationship, not with your children, with each one of your children? How do you practice that? Is Jesus the center of that friendship? Are both of you aware of that? How do you practice that so that both are aware? Because until that is mutually acknowledged, that Jesus is the center of this relationship, I will always fall short of bridging the gap. And there really isn't hope. But when Jesus is the center, there's always hope. The art of hope is taking the little bit that I have and bringing it to Jesus at the center of the relationship and watching him multiply what I've given him to meet the need in the relationship. Because when I take the little bit that I have, there's always hope when Jesus is in it. Here's the beautiful part about it. The little bit that you have didn't originate with you. It originated with him anyway. It's what he's entrusted to you. So how can you take what he's entrusted to you, bring it to him, and allow him to multiply it to meet the need, the bigger need in the relationship? You may have been betrayed. Put Jesus in the center and bring what little bit of life you have left to it. What little bit of forgiveness, what little bit of faith, what little bit of love, what little bit of action, what little bit of showing up today, and you put it in his hands and watch what he will do with it. He will multiply it day in and day out, because one more day turns into one more week, which turns into one more month, which turns into 10 more years, which turns into the rest of your life better than it ever could have been. And it all started with a glimmer of hope of bringing the little bit that you have and putting it in to the hands of Jesus. When you take what you have, no matter how big or small, and put it into the hands of Jesus, there is always hope for today. And there's always enough for tomorrow. There's so much that there's always leftovers that will fold into other parts of your life. It's a character trait that you hone in on. It's a practice of bringing the little bit that you have to him and watching what he does with it. We live life like it's all on us. We live in relationship as if it's all on us. When we have the King of the universe at the center of our relationships and we bring it to him, he multiplies, meets the need, bridges the gap, and hopes all things, because he is hope. I'll see you on our walk today. There's some journal prompts below. Make sure to write them in, and let's see how you can grow in this area of hoping all things. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.